From 1945 to 1991, the United States and the USSR built militaries and created alliances directly opposing the other's dominance in the world, and had contingent plans in the event of a conflict between the two in Central Europe. Such a conflict never took place between the two states, though, which may in large part be due to the fact that both America and the USSR built thousands of nuclear weapons that would obliterate each other in the event of a conflict. From the United States' perspective, if the USSR ever chose to invade or attack a NATO state, say West Germany, the United States would be able to use nuclear weapons against Soviet cities and completely destroy the USSR's manpower, supply lines, and leadership within a matter of a nuke. This threat of nuclear destruction to the Soviet Politburo meant that no matter how stronger its military was than West Germany or any other NATO state, or how many more resources it had, invading West Germany would not be a good decision due to the decisive and swift destruction of an American nuke. Such was the nature of affairs while America was the only state with weapons of mass destruction until the USSR built them too in 1949. At this point, even though America might have had a stronger military and economy than the USSR, and would have been able to militarily dismantle communist governments in Poland or Czechoslovakia through superior military size and technology, Soviet nuclear retaliation, which would entail all the consequences previously mentioned, meant that invading the USSR or any of its weaker allies would not be a good decision and would entail more cost than benefit, if any benefit at all. What's more is that at this point, with both the United States and the USSR having nuclear weapons, any act of aggression by one triggering the other into a conflict would see both of their nuclear arsenals firing into one another, and would see both states being destroyed. This makes engagement in the conflict, which could entail the usage of such nuclear weapons politically, strategically, and economically undesirable, leaving both powers to avoid direct confrontation and resort either to diplomatic or indirect ways of solving issues to avoid the usage of such weapons. On the morning of February 24, 2022, Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered troops to cross the Russian border into Ukraine with the aim of, quote, demilitarization and denazification of Ukraine, essentially an invasion of the country. Russians made strides and took over significant swaths of territory in the north and southeast of Ukraine. To avoid appeasing Putin, though, many NATO states gave support to the Ukrainian military, and with this support, the Ukrainian military was able to hold its ground against Russian troops in certain areas. Moreover, Russian logistical issues and unpreparedness very much hindered the Russian military's ability to push through the Ukrainian lines. All of this, with the intense moral conviction the Ukrainians had under the leadership of Volodymyr Zelensky, eventually led the Russian troops to backing out of northern Ukraine, and failing to swiftly take over Kiev, the Ukrainian capital. Russian leadership then decided to focus on the southeast of Ukraine, and although they have held the lines there longer, they have not made any major breakthroughs and have even lost significant amounts of land that they had previously taken over. The Russian Federation is even struggling to keep its military strong, as illustrated by the fact that it has had to purchase drones and military hardware from Iran and North Korea, and the fact that in mid-September President Putin ordered a partial mobilization of Russian troops to fight in the conflict. The first of which indicates that Russia as a country does not have the means to produce its own weaponry and items, and thus signifies a weakening of the Russian Federation as a whole. The partial mobilization shows that the Russian military has lost substantial amounts of soldiers, enough to merit any level of mobilization, which is significant as it demonstrates an unexpected loss of soldiers, signifying again the weakened state of Russia's military. At this stage, there is no easy way out for President Putin. If he were to surrender or back out, he would look weak on the international stage and at home, especially as a majority of Russians believe in Putin's stance on Ukraine. Moreover, by backing out, Russia's prestige, which Putin has tried to build up since he took power, would likely diminish as the country doesn't even seem capable of taking over a comparatively tiny neighbor. Without the military to push through Ukrainian lines, and with compromise being politically embarrassing, some have considered the possibility of President Putin using nuclear weapons on Ukraine as a way to swiftly take over the country after all else has failed. However, this too is not as simple of a choice. To start with, the deployment of such a weapon is a clear escalation, when that significantly changes the nature of the conflict. Whereas the West can supply weapons to Ukraine, they cannot supply weapons of mass destruction, and the Ukrainians may not have a clear direct counter to nuclear weapons as they would to conventional tanks or troops. From the perspective of NATO states, letting the use of nuclear weapons go unpunished could set a precedent in international politics, where dictators like Putin can use weapons of mass destruction and nobody would stop him. This is especially troubling the other countries of the former USSR, including the Baltic states that are in NATO, Georgia, which has actually previously been invaded by Russia in 2008, and Kazakhstan, which has been concerned with its neighbors' actions. If Putin sees that he can take over Ukraine no matter how hard, he may think the same of those other states. Thus, in order to prevent Putin from gaining this idea, NATO states may find that getting involved directly would be a necessary counter to Putin's escalation, in which case Putin may see himself having to fight the combined military force of the United States, France, the United Kingdom, Germany, Turkey, and the rest of NATO, as well as anyone else who feels compelled to join the fight against the warmonger. Moreover, in such a hypothetical scenario, the Russian Federation would likely be by itself and even more of a pariah state than before. Despite its friendly ties, Chinese President Xi Jinping has condemned any use of nuclear weapons, and even Indian President Narendra Modi, whose country has enjoyed discounts on Russian gas ever since sales to Europe stopped, has stated that, quote, "now is not the time for war," in a meeting with Putin last September 2022. Without any support, Russia would likely not be able to handle itself against such a coalition to push it out of Ukraine. Moreover, using nuclear weapons legitimizes Russia's pariah state even more, as many around the world would not be okay with the clear use of brute force on behalf of the Russian Federation, and would find it immoral to do business with them, and will give justification to United States-led severe sanctions on the Russian Federation among the neutral states in the international community. Overall, using nuclear weapons would likely turn the world on Putin morally, and thus politically and economically, and would leave him without any real useful allies. Moreover, such an escalation of a military operation, as he put it, using weapons of mass destruction may not even go well with the Russian people. If he uses them, he may see all of NATO plus a few more states fighting to push him out of Ukraine, without any allies to back him. Even in this case, usage of weapons of mass destruction to defend anything he may have gained could simply lead to a destruction of the Russian states, as the leaders of the USSR wanted to avoid during their time. All of this is to indicate that, strategically speaking, weapons of mass destruction should not be used by the Russian government, for they have more to lose in a situation where they already lost, especially when it's existential. The conflict has been disastrous on all sides of the conflict for both Ukraine and Russia, whether directly or indirectly, and the orders of a dictator should not be equated with the people he misleads. It would simply be beneficial to everyone were the conflict done with in general.